Hello there, it's good to have you here. I'm the Last Mikester and welcome back to the channel for a throwback review of sorts. Jurassic Park the Game is a story-driven action-adventure game developed and published by Telltale Games and released on December 15th, 2011. And yes, that's the same company who made Batman, The Wolf Among Us, and The Walking Dead series, all three of which are sitting at very positive to overwhelmingly positive review scores on Steam. Impressive, to say the least. However, it seems like Telltale, despite its success with those games, couldn't get the sales it was looking for later on, and the company officially closed in 2018. As the last major investor pulled out, 90% of the employees were let go, and digital marketplaces pulled the company's games. LCG Entertainment bought them out, and to my knowledge, the new Telltale plans to re-release the company's old catalog of games, but as of right now, it means that some of their older stuff, including Jurassic Park the Game, is no longer available to purchase on a site like Steam, so if you want it, you will have to look elsewhere. If you bought the game before it was pulled, like I did, then you will of course still have access to it. So, let's head back to 2011 where Telltale released their own dinosaur adventure in the Jurassic universe to rather mixed reception. So, what happened? Well, I think for one, this was a time where Telltale was getting their very well-known formula nailed down. Shortly after the game's release, there was a controversy regarding users' scores for the game, where a few Telltale employees wrote 10 out of 10 reviews for their own damn game, a scheme that was quickly discovered by people matching the names of reviewers with the names of employees, resulting in a bunch of unhappy users who then wrote 0 out of 10 reviews just to spite Telltale, and the game's score plummeted.
So basically, what I was thinking of was, oh fuck, I can't believe you've done this.
While I personally just kind of find all of this rather amusing, it did result in Telltale's reputation ending up as
one big pile of shit.
At least back then. Of course, an 11-year-old controversy and the company's closure and reopening of sorts hasn't affected my opinion on the game, but I just find all of this history interesting and figured you guys might too. I will be going into the story of the game in this video, so there will of course be spoilers. I mean, it's an 11-year-old game, and I feel like if you were gonna play it, you would have done so by now, but yeah, spoiler warning just in case. This is the second time I've played through the whole game, so I'm pretty familiar with the game this time around. So, without further dinosaur, oh boy.
Why are we still here?
Let's jump into an adventure 65 million years in the making with Jurassic Park the Game. Our jaunty Jurassic journey begins by beginning with a sexy but injured Spanish woman running through the jungle being chased by a bunch of creepy eyes. As concerning as that may sound, it's really just a bunch of murderous dinosaurs. Nothing to worry about, probably. This is where the first major mystery of the game is presented to you, and is actually a rather big part of the story. The two main types of gameplay are also presented to you. The first of which is everyone's favorite form of testing your reaction time with quick time events. Yeah, I'm really not a fan of these in any game, and while this isn't the worst implementation of them that I have seen, it's not great either. The game doesn't usually seem to punish you for hitting the incorrect key, but does punish you for either not pressing them fast enough or at the wrong times, which means the whole system is kinda janky and pretty hit or miss. Get it? Terrible jokes aside, it's a very finicky way of, well, doing anything in an action scene, and unfortunately every action sequence in the game consists of these, which practically nullifies any enjoyment and excitement that these parts of the game could have had otherwise. The second type of gameplay is what the game calls exploration scenes, although that's a wee bit misleading once again, as they are really just a small set of areas that you can walk back and forth from, and in each area are a limited number of things you can click on and people you can talk with. Anywho, back to the story, where our Spanish friend named Nima is still dealing with the glowy-eyed dinos, and by dealing, I mean getting yeeted off a cliff. How she survives getting her spine and face bashed directly into solid rock is beyond me, but hey, I guess she's just that much of a badass. At the bottom of the cliff, you'll discover perhaps the lamest button mashing sequence I have ever seen, where you spam the key so that Nima can get herself up off the ground. I don't know who thought this was engaging gameplay, but they clearly need to be fired, cause holy hellfire is this dumb, and this isn't the only time where the game makes you press random buttons to do the most mundane things. Anyway, when you are finished spamming the get your ass up button, her luck gets even worse when she gets hit by a car, and that's where the scene ends. In said car are Jerry and Jessica Harding, and if that last name rings a bell, then good, because Jerry is this guy from the first Jurassic Park film, albeit with a different look and voice, and one of his two daughters is Sarah from The Lost World. This game is generally considered to be part of the Jurassic canon, more or less, as certain elements in it are used later on, while others are changed completely. Jerry works at Jurassic Park, of course, and his daughter Jessica has come down to visit for the weekend, although soon enough she'll come to regret that decision. They have a nice little moment with the classic Jurassic Park music playing in the background, which I of course can't play to avoid getting copyrighted up the ass, and you get to see some Triceratops as well. Through your binoculars you'll spot a Jeep, and Jerry will say this.
Must be Hammond's visitors. He's got some hotshot paleontologists here to see the park.
So yeah, as you might have guessed, that's the main gang from Jurassic Park, and this game takes place partially alongside, but mostly after the events of the film. Of course, everything is all lovely and peaceful, but as we all know...
Yeah, that's how it always starts.
Then the game does a little foreshadowing.
Let's hope for clear skies tonight. No fun on that boat when the waves are rough.
Of course, storms have a history of being totally fine and safe things in the Jurassic films, so no worries, I'm sure it's all good. Then we meet Nima before shit hits the fan, as well as this guy, Miles. Oh, what's that? A corporate asshole on Dinosaur Island? I'm sure he'll live a long, happy, and healthy life full of oh dear. Yeah, shockingly enough, he dies. This scene is where you first really start to notice the stiff animations of the characters and just some weird facial expressions and awkward pauses. It gets more noticeable and apparent as the game goes on and can be unintentionally comical at times. On the plus side though, in this scene you get a reference to the first Jurassic Park.
Hey, guess who's on the line? It's Dodgson. I got Dodgson here.
Nima and Miles are essentially undercover spies that arrive on Isla Nublar to meet with Nedry, who was supposed to deliver the Barbasol can full of dino embryos to them. Since right around this time Nedry is being chewed on by a Dilophosaurus, he doesn't show up, and since they are both getting paid a lot for this gig, they decide to go in after him, which I'm sure could only end well. You get another superbly engaging sequence of button timing where you hack your way through the jungle, and let me just say that this gameplay, where you have to time the key presses, particularly in this scene, is just so finicky and terribly designed. It's actually impressive how they managed to make wielding a machete feel and play so horrendously. You get your first major exploration scene, and it's actually probably one of the coolest ones in the whole game, as you get to explore the little area where Nedry got his Jeep stuck and, you know, died. You do some Sherlock Holmes kind of stuff, and eventually find the Barbasol can, right where Nedry dropped it, which is a nice touch. Then shit goes awry. You get your first major dinosaur encounter with Nedry's killer, the Dilophosaurus, or rather a whole group of them. Miles shoves Nima to the ground as a distraction, proving once and for all that he has no morals, just in case you had your doubts, and then dies face first in the dirt with a couple of Dilophosaurs chomping on his back. A scene that quite simply makes me happy. But then things get weird, as just when it seems like the Dilos are about to make a snack out of Nima too, they get spooked by something. Then that same something bites Nima's arm, leading us to the first scene of the game. We then get some dialogue between Jerry and Jessica as they are driving back to the visitor center. You know, divorced parents, stop shoplifting, when Jurassic Park opens fully you can come back to see all of the dinos, typical teenage stuff really. Then he runs Nima over. Well, slightly taps her with the Jeep. He notices her eyes are super red, so maybe her favorite number is 420, but more likely she's been poisoned from the bite. He gets Jess to drive as he tends to Nima's wound. Then they come upon an escaped Triceratops who is coaxed back into her exhibit through some gentle encouragement, which pisses off Mama Trike, resulting in... Then Rexy shows up to the party, ready to eat another lawyer, but instead finds a Triceratops and the two square off. Now I think you kind of have to have some amount of suspension of disbelief when dealing with the Jurassic films, but when a teenage girl can start dodging a T-Rex with little effort, like Neo dodging bullets, I can't help but question how truly dangerous the dinosaurs are. Oh well, the story keeps going, and Jerry, Jessica, and an unconscious Nima manage to escape the fight and take shelter in a maintenance shed for the night. They wake up the next morning to the aftermath of the fight. We then get introduced to another main character with Dr. Sorkin, a paleogeneticist and a rather hardcore environmentalist as well. She is able to get into Nedry's computer system, albeit with some minor problems and another reference.
You didn't say the magic word.
Also, apparently Nedry's password is Studry, because of course it is. She activates a tour car to pick up Jerry and Jessica and take them to the visitor center.
This concludes our tour. Don't forget to visit the gift shop on your way home.
That is messed up.
This scene is pretty cool as you get to see the aftermath of the fight in the center and the dismembered foot of the big one, which was the main raptor in the first film that was killed by Rexy at the end. Once there, Rexy comes back to eat some fools and wreck some buildings. Well, no one gets eaten and only a small part of the building gets wrecked, but yeah, whatever. Sorkin is able to activate the tour car, getting Rexy to chase it and leave the area. Upon Sorkin's recommendation, Jerry uses a trank dart to counteract the poison in Nima's arm, but then Nima goes a little nuts and decides to take Jerry and Jess hostage, forcing them to leave the visitor center, and so begins Chapter 2 called The Cavalry, where we are introduced to the final two main characters, Yoder and the absolute mountain of a man, Oscar, along with this dude named Decaf, which, while he may have an excellent nickname, my boy is not long for this world. They are part of Alpha Team, one of two rescue teams sent to the island by InGen once they realized that not everyone was accounted for after the disaster. They are pretty much just a wisecracking group of mercenaries, but that's fine with me.
Want to see dinosaurs? I'll get you some coloring books.
They might be too complicated for Yoder. How about it, Billy? Can you keep in the lines?
They ask you how you are, you just have to say that you're fine when you're not really fine.
They arrive at the visitor center to, big surprise, the bodies of Bravo Team. Turns out one of the mercenaries was bitten by the same dino as Nima was, and went a little cuckoo. Yoder and Oscar are able to incapacitate him, but when they leave to check the security footage to find out what happened, he gets dragged away and killed by the mysterious glowy-eyed poison dinos. Deciding that shit's getting just a bit too real, they leave the visitor center to the stalkers in the shadows. The next scene involves a lovely camping trip, which also happens to be a hostage situation. Nima kind of avoids Jerry's questions as to, why the hell are you holding a gun to my head and threatening to kill my daughter, which I think is a fair question, all things considered. Jerry riles up Nima while Jessica manages to snatch the radio when she's distracted, and gets a brief message out to the rescue team before Nima realizes what's happened, and gets a little mad, but no one gets hurt because Nima isn't the bitch that she may seem like, and they move on. Back in the air, the mercenaries' helicopter gets bonked into by a pteranodon, and they are forced to make an emergency landing. Yoder and Oscar go looking for the Hardings while Decaf repairs the helicopter. Yoder has a little skirmish with the Dilophosaurus, which ends with the little guy getting kicked in the face by Oscar, but Yoder steps in to prevent Oscar from killing it, which I have to admit shows a nice little bit of depth to the characters. The pair hear an intercom off in the distance, and that brings me to one of my favorite scenes in the game, as it is a pretty unique idea for an action sequence. Before that is another exploration puzzle section where one of the funniest things to happen when you fail a QuickTime event occurred.
The doors are locked.
Well, I don't have a key.
That's cool. I'll just bust the windows.
If that's not the definition of you throw like a girl, then I don't know what is. Now on to the action bit. During this section, the gang has to fend off a group of Herrerasaurus while riding a roller coaster. Combine that with the name of the ride, and you got a fun little sequence that is actually kinda tense. Yoder and Oscar come to the rescue of the Hardings and Nima, saving them before the carts tumble off the edge of the missing track. With two mercenaries brandishing AK-47s, Nima gives up and the hostage situation comes to an end. The group return to the helicopter and they find that Decaf is missing, and Oscar proclaims him MIA because it's Jurassic Park and that's just the way it goes. However, we'll be seeing him later. Rexy comes back to try and ruin everyone's day, but Oscar manages to fix the helicopter, and this must be the slowest I have seen someone move in a rather urgent situation. I mean, you can literally hear Rexy's footsteps the whole time during this section, but yet Oscar takes more time doing this crap than I take to get out of bed in the morning. Oh well, no matter, the group escape in the helicopter while Oscar and Nima have a little squabble, and it's implied that they have a history together, and seeing as they are both mercenaries, that could make sense. They land at Dr. Sorkin's lab, where she seems rather reluctant to leave, as she has been working on a behavioral program for the Parasaurolophus, interpreting their calls and such. Lysine contingency is mentioned here, which I'll allow Sorkin to explain here briefly in case you have forgotten.
InGen, Henry Wu, added a gene to the dinosaurs that makes them dependent on supplements of an amino acid called lysine. Without their weekly doses, they'll all die off.
Naturally, if she goes back to the mainland, they will all be dead by the time she returns, and she wants to continue her research, so she has devised a solution to reverse the lysine contingency by adding it to the Para's water supply and allowing them to live out their normal lifespan. So, Jerry, Jess, and Sorkin head to the Parasaur pen to test it out. Meanwhile, Nima manages to escape the cuff she was put into and attempts to fly away, leading to Yoda taking control of the heli while Oscar and Nima duke it out in the back. Oscar knocks out Nima, but not before she throws a knife meant for Oscar into the helicopter controls, which I have no idea how this could have happened judging by where the knife was thrown, but I'll roll with it. Back at the lab, things turn dangerous and we get our first encounter with velociraptors. Being the Giga Chad that Jerry is, he manages to escape them and get up the water tower where Jess and Sorkin are waiting. Because the game needs an easy way to put the characters in a time-limited scenario and an exciting opening to Chapter 3, titled The Depths, the helicopter crashes into the water tower, damaging the base, and leading to the raptors bashing their heads into it to try and topple it. The gang figure out a way way down and make a run for the maintenance tunnels, managing to get in and close the door, escaping the raptors. At the crash site, everyone has survived. Yoder discovers the Barbasol can, Oscar goes looking for the Hardings and Sorkin, while Yoder stays with Nima, who is unconscious again, and while Oscar goes into the maintenance tunnels, Nima tells Yoder about the embryos, and by revealing information about her daughter, who is in the slums, she is able to convince him to double-cross InGen by cutting him in on the money offered for the embryos by InGen's rivals. He agrees, but asks to cut in Oscar as well, and Nima reluctantly agrees. Rexy visits Yoder and Nima. Apparently she is rather vengeful, as she actually yeets a piece of metal at Yoder. I can usually handle silly things like people outrunning raptors, but this is pretty dumb, I gotta say. Yoder dodges Resky's frisbee throw, and him and Nima hightail it to the Parasaur enclosure. In the tunnels, Jerry and Sorkin have a heated argument after Sorkin reveals that she put the antidote in the main water supply, which means it will reach every dinosaur in the park before long, therefore reversing the lysine contingency completely. It's a decent scene, and there's actually some pretty interesting dialogue here. It even touches on themes introduced in Jurassic World and Fallen Kingdom, and touches on other things that the movie didn't have time to tackle.
That a dinosaur could make it to the mainland is far outweighed by our responsibility to treat these animals humanely. They're here because of us.
Overall, pretty good writing here. I like it. Yoder and Nima barely escape into the tunnels, and while they attempt to restore power to the area, Yoder mentions Ground Zero, which will be an important plot point down the line. We then check back in with Oscar, who is hunting wabbits. Well, waptors, I guess. This leads to one of the most badass scenes in the game, and while it may not make a whole lot of sense, I guess if there was any man capable of taking on a raptor with nothing but a knife, it's this guy. One of Sorkin's co-workers had a radio show, so you get some music for your knife versus raptor fight. But yeah, Oscar wins and successfully manages to kill the raptor. Bravo, my man, color me very impressed. Yoder and Nima meet up with the raptor slayer, and they head towards the other three. Speaking of the other three, they end up having their hands full with the raptors as well, and it's all because Jessica wanted to smoke, apparently, and I guess chucking a pack of cigarettes into a raptor's mouth is a surefire way of discouraging it. Who would have thought? I failed a couple times during this section, and while I like my boy Jerry as a character, I couldn't help but laugh at these deaths. Anyway, Jerry manages to fend the three of them off with a piece of pipe. Okay. And Jessica drives a forklift into them just in time for Oscar to burst in and scare them off for good with his manliness, I guess. Well, that and he slashes one of them, giving it a scar. Then steam makes an appearance. Turns out something is wrong with the island's geothermal power plant, and if we don't fix it, things are gonna go boom. So, with Sorkin in the lead, the group heads that way. Jerry goes full-on dad mode when he finds out Jessica stole Sorkin's smokes, and we have arrived at probably the first time that the game hit me in the feels, as the door controls get fried, so they have to be manually opened, and the panel is by the door, below the platform, and right next to our raptor buddies. With Oscar also being a gigachad like Jerry, he simply says,
I'm on it.
He makes it to the controls and opens the doors, but is killed in the process. Rip big man Oscar, never forget. The doors on the platform open as the raptors figure out that the way Oscar got down is the way they can get up, and the group is forced to flee back into the tunnels. The raptors chase them into a utility room, but in a similar fashion to the Dilos in the beginning, the raptors get spooked and take off. The group, well, regroups, and Oscar's death turns out to have even worse consequences than it first appears, as it's the catalyst for Yoder's descent into madness. It's not Far Cry 3 Voss level of insanity, but he definitely goes through a pretty radical change. You can sort of tell initially as he becomes more reserved and things get even worse when two mysteries are solved, the first of which is the fate of the helicopter's pilot, Decaf, or what's left of him. It turns out that something actually laid eggs inside his abdomen, which sounds like some crazy sci-fi horror shit, and this is where the game becomes a little more like the Jurassic Park novel, where it delves into some dark science. It's short-lived, but a really unique vibe in a messed up sort of way. Before they attack the group, Sorkin reveals that she knew about them all along, and even that they had gotten out somehow, but she never told anyone, which angers an already grieving Yoder. This kicks off the fourth and final episode, fittingly named The Survivors. Now, even if the animations are a little lacking during this argument, the voice acting here is actually really good. Then of course we have the little somethings that laid the eggs, stalked and poisoned Nima, caused the deaths of Bravo Team and Decaf, and overall just had a terrifying presence. The creature in question is the Troodon. Yoder threatens Sorkin while she attempts to explain what happened with the Troodons. Jerry manages to calm Yoder down enough to avoid him outright stabbing her. The group looks for something they can use in another exploration scene, and Yoder takes a grenade off of Decaf's corpse. It's not long before the Troodons attack the group through the vents, which is quite the terrifying proposition, I must say. The sounds these guys make are creepy.
They're coming through the vent.
Their eyes are an eerie, milky white, and just the overall design is rather terrifying, and hats off to whoever made these little demons. Jerry grabs an air tank to smash the lock on a bigger vent that they can all fit through, and Jessica and Sorkin, do nothing. Yoder throws a flare to Nima so she can deal with her Troodon, and they escape through the vent, while Yoder finishes fighting Growly Boy over here. They race through the tunnels, pursued by more Troodons, and eventually arrive at an intersection, which presents the player with another puzzle. One neat little feature here is how the game handles the darkness of the tunnels, where if you manage to pick up the flares in the other room, you can use them to see better and complete the puzzle faster, but if you don't have them, the longer you hold your mouse over the corridor, things will be easier to see, as if the character's eyes are adjusting to the darkness. It's not a huge thing, but kinda cool. The Troodons attack the group, splitting them up, as Yoder uses the flare to defend Jessica and Sorkin, while Jerry and Nima escape through a hatch that leads outside. They have a nice little conversation where you get to learn more about Nima's past and the island's history. Nima apologizes for the whole hostage thing, and opens up about her daughter, who is stuck in the slums, and the money from this job was supposed to be what saves her from a terrible fate. Before this, I had never really considered that the island could be a home for a tribe of people, and with a corporate entity like InGen coming in to build a dinosaur park, one could definitely see how the culture and traditions of Nima's people could be lost.
They didn't keep their promise.
I guess from a point of view they did. But the homes were slums and the medicine was extra or half-used or contaminated. We had schools, but no teachers.
Sibo was also in the songs of Nima's people, and yeah, that's the same Mount Sibo that erupts in Fallen Kingdom. There is some really cool stuff here, and while most of it is optional dialogue, it was interesting enough to hold my attention for a little while. The same tour car that Rexy chased down conveniently drives past, allowing Jerry and Nima to hitch a ride to the marine facility. The group reunites there, but things are not all sunshine and smiles, as Yoda reveals that Ground Zero is actually the plan of the US military to bomb the island.
We don't contact InGen and get another helicopter out here for you all. The next flight over the island is gonna be a wing of B-52s carrying holy hellfire.
What?
Nima gets pretty upset as well, naturally, as her home is literally going to be sunk into the Pacific. This causes Sorkin to go all mad scientist and lock herself in the main rotunda, where she pulls on Nima and holds everyone hostage in a desperate attempt to save the dinosaurs, and this also gives me some Fallen Kingdom vibes, where everyone is wondering what the best option to deal with the dinos is.
Our dinosaurs are phantoms. Majestic as they may be, alive as they may be. We brought them into a world that is no longer prepared for them.
After some dialogue concerning the bombing and the dinosaurs, Laura decides it would be an awesome idea to release the Tylosaurus, a huge marine reptile, not just into the lagoon, but into the world's oceans. Naturally, Jerry disagrees with this course of action.
It's only one. It can be recaptured.
Before it eats the last of the humpbacks?
Yoder decides to pick up an axe and force his way in. Sorkin releases the Tylosaurus, and since karma is a bitch, it smashes into the glass, sending her flying into the water, and I'm sure you can all guess what happens next. Anyone get a kick out of the sound it makes when she gets pulled into the wall? Anyway, Yoder gives the go-ahead over phone to bomb things to hell, and then he pulls a Sorkin and goes batshit, telling Nima to come with him as he kills Jerry and Jessica, I guess. Seems a bit harsh, but this is really where Yoder's sanity seems to check out, and where his character arc ends. Nima, of course, refuses, so he uses the grenade he nicked from Decaf earlier to crack the glass, and this seems to be his idea of giving them all a fighting chance, so I guess he just planned on going all axe murderer on them, I don't know. He leaves in the elevator, but not before Jess manages to put her shoplifting skills to use one last time and nick the Barbasol can from Yoder. Trapped in the facility, Nima, Jerry, and Jess come to the conclusion that with the nearby diving gear, swimming out is their only option. This sequence is pretty suspenseful actually, and is just so different from the rest of the game, not to mention the fact that QuickTime events are just more stressful underwater, at least for me. All three of them manage to make it out of the marine lizard from Hell's habitat and, reunite with Yoder, who is less than pleased about the situation. Nima and Yoder square off, and even if you get your buttons right, Yoder wins. But who else could save the day other than Rexy? I guess she followed the gang all the way down to the coast, or something? Everyone stands still, but Jerry kicks the Barbasol can towards the water, and Yoder buckles and rushes to get it, and I guess temporarily forgets about the rather large T-Rex behind him, and gets munched, while the Barbasol can flies into the air and lands on the ground. Yoder's story is kinda tragic actually, and I wasn't happy per se to see him die, but I guess karma always comes back around. While Yoder is being digested, the group takes the opportunity to run, and this is the first and only time where the game gives you a choice. Jess runs up onto a skywalk, and Rexy smashes it, leaving Jess hanging on for dear life and causing Nima to drop the can, and therefore giving Nima the decision to either save Jess or go for the can. If you choose to save the can, Nima rushes out to grab it but is met with a face full of Rexy, and gets to have a rematch with Yoder in Rexy's stomach, and I assume the embryos go with her. If you choose to save Jess, Nima pulls Jess up and Rexy steps on the embryos, crushing them. In both scenarios, Jerry distracts Rexy by whacking her leg with a log. Okay, fair enough. Which causes her to chase him instead. This brings us to the last action scene of the game, which I somehow managed to complete with no slip-ups, and while it might be unrealistic, it's actually pretty epic, and Jerry gets to show off his giga-chadness one last time. The game ends with either Jerry and Jess, or Jerry, Nima, and Jess, escaping the island without the Barbasol can, but with a handy stash of money that someone left on the boat. Whew! Okay, so there you have it folks, Jurassic Park the game. Now, do I hate it? No, I don't. It's not terrible, but it certainly isn't what I would call a good game. Well, I don't know if I would call it a game at all really, as it's more of an interactive movie, and yeah, I know that was Telltale's style, but I'm just not a huge fan. Initially, I was actually going to title this video Jurassic Park the Game, a Jurassic Disaster, but I don't think it's quite that bad, and you might be wondering why I used the word Snoozefest instead, and it's really just because I was bored for like half the game. It's just not much of an engaging experience. You get the odd suspenseful scene, but that's it. The QuickTime events are finicky, the exploration scenes are linear and limited, a lot of the action scenes and story beats don't really make a lot of sense if you think about it for too long, even if the story itself overall is decent and the dialogue can be good, while the voice acting is surprisingly solid. As a nice little bonus, you get a journal at the main menu to read. It's a small collection of Sorkin's notes on the various dinosaur species and the occasional comment on the inner workings of Jurassic Park. It's not a bad little read and has some interesting lore. As for the animations and graphics, well, they aren't great at all, and more often than not, the humans kinda look like jittery pieces of rubber moving around, and while the dinosaurs look a little better, with the design of the Troodons and the Tylosaurus in particular being quite awesome, there are just better options, and for the best Jurassic gaming experience, look no further than Jurassic World Evolution 2. The music is as good as ever, but that's a credit to John Williams and not this game. While it's not a horrendous addition to the Jurassic franchise, it just lacks energy and spark, and that's why Jurassic Park the Game is a Jurassic Snoozefest. Thank you all very much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, then consider giving it a like and subscribing. If you are subscribed, then hit that bell so you don't miss any new videos. I always appreciate the support. Much love, take care, and until next time, have a good one.